it's getting more and more crowded now. And I think we can start now. So as already mentioned, hello everyone and welcome to today's session. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Marcel and I'm your moderator in the upcoming session. Today we are talking about Let's Get Techy, a technical roadmap for your API ecosystem, presented by Amber Fallon. She is Technical Sales Engineer at Ometria, Stuart Barker, General Manager Europe, and Ben Cook, General Manager Business Development and Marketing at Comestri. And last but not least, Georg Sorst. He is Principal Engineer at Findologic. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A panel at the bottom of the Zoom interface. And yeah, I will bring up all questions during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions at the end. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Amber. Amber, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Marcel. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Today, I would like to get started going through a presentation I've put together on API ecosystems and the benefits for technical professionals in an increasingly connected world. As Marcel mentioned, I'm Amber Fallon, Technical Sales Engineer at Ometria. Our world is a very connected place. If the past 2 years have taught us anything, it's that connection is absolutely essential to the way we live, work, and shop. Connection to each other, connection to our friends, our families, our employers, and the places we do business with. APIs are those connections. APIs are the language of our connected world, the way systems communicate behind the scenes. Therefore, it should stand to reason that better APIs mean better communication. But what does that mean when it comes to the retail marketplace? There is a lot more than meets the eye. The systems we use to buy and sell have become increasingly complex, with an ever-expanding number of dependencies on other systems. Reliable, fast communication between these systems is vital to end-user experience. Now, I know that looks like a lot of things on your screen, and it's designed that way because I want to break down a typical buyer journey and talk through all of the API connections that are involved in making that possible. So let's say I'm a buyer. I'm browsing social media when an ad for a new product catches my eye. Clicking on the ad takes me to the retailer's website. I haven't shopped there before, so I authenticate through Google. I get to the checkout and select PayPal as my payment method. PayPal verifies with my bank that the funds are available and confirms my shipping address with the merchant. The merchant sends a confirmation email and a confirmation to PayPal, who sends me an additional confirmation. The merchant notifies their shipping carrier via their warehouse and my purchase has been completed. The confirmation page asks me to share my purchase on social media. That's actually a simplified version of that API transaction that ignores data collection, marketing information, analytics, and all of the various back-end processing systems that work behind the scenes to make my experience seamless and easy. So as you can see, APIs factor heavily into everyday purchases and everyday transactions. But I'd like to take a second and actually zoom in and focus on one in specific. So let's take a look let's narrow in on just one piece of the puzzle. The APIs that connect our retail store to their shipping company. We need to be able to trigger the shipping process quickly after the purchase has been completed. How do we do that? You guessed it, it's an API call. A call is made from the merchant to the shipper containing information about the shipment, shipping speed, size of the item, carrier, and more. A nested framework of interconnected API calls happens behind the scenes between the shipper, the warehouse, and the merchant site to facilitate a smooth transaction. And that's just one page of the story. I could go on and on, but I think I've made my point. APIs are increasingly more prevalent and they aren't going anywhere. So APIs made that transaction possible. Technology connects virtually everything in ways that we never could have imagined 20, 30, 40 years ago. There were a lot of APIs involved in the use case that we just walked through. Each one of them represented a potential point of failure as well as an integration point. I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes of all time from the television show Futurama. When you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. When all of the APIs involved in interaction are available and they work as designed, we get the type of experience we expect. When they don't work, when they aren't available to connect to, we get frustrated. And that goes for pretty much any end user. If they can't do what they want to do, or if it takes too long or involves too many steps, they often give up and go somewhere else. This can result in major downstream impacts, especially in the retail marketplace. APIs are mission critical to today's business. Imagine you're a new retailer. You've spent a major amount of time and effort, not to mention money, getting your products ready to sell. Working with suppliers to source materials, production, partnering with shipping companies, advertisers, influencers, everything you can do to get noticed. You've done all of this amazing work, but you forgot one key thing: APIs. If your customers can't purchase your products as easily as they would like, they may not purchase at all. No customers means no business. And all of this goes to show the importance of having a well-documented and accessible API. And that goes for any link in the chain, not just retailers. Social media sites, payment processors, marketers, data aggregators, analytics tools, performance monitoring tools, rewards programs, protection plans, the list goes on and on and on. Having a reliable, functional API benefits pretty much every business in today's connected world. APIs are the language of modern business. And technology fosters connection. As a technology professional myself, I deal with APIs in one way or another every single day. Whether you sell, support, integrate, build, or design software, chances are you do too, whether you know it or not. Now, I'd like to take a step back and briefly discuss the Ometria approach to APIs. As a provider of digital marketing experiences, data ingestion is vital to the service Ometria delivers to our customers. We need flexible APIs that are simple to use and fully documented, that deliver the information our customers need to personalize their content, target their customers, and gather valuable data points. Our approach to APIs is one of transparency and utility. We focus on making our tool easy to integrate with by leveraging our powerful APIs. Which is why API documentation is one part roadmap, one part dictionary. Thorough, comprehensive API documentation is a cornerstone of solid design. In and of itself, an API is just code. It has no human readable interface. Good documentation takes the place of that interface, allowing technology professionals to interpret the API and its capabilities at a glance. Documentation is the framework on which API calls themselves are built. Good documentation will answer the following questions. What does this API do? How does it work? How do I send and receive information from it? Without solid documentation, technology professionals are left to spend time and effort deciphering an API on their own, using external tools to get the information they require. I'd like to take a quick moment and talk about some best practices for data ingesters and data senders. Now, there's a lot of similarities between the two. If you wanted to screenshot and have a little focus card for yourself to pin up at your desk, this would be a good time. API best practices for data ingesters, focusing on end users. Think about developers. How can you make your APIs as easy to use as possible? Consider the types of tools you have to integrate with. Oftentimes, myself, when I'm working with APIs, I find myself thinking about the best way that I would have done documentation for that API. Protecting the security and integrity of your data is also super important. What type of authentication should be put into place? Should you consider rate limiting? And put on a plan to routinely test your APIs. It's almost as vital as making sure your website is accessible. If your APIs aren't available, people will get upset, they'll get tired, they'll move on. And that's not what we want. We want functional APIs and we want satisfied customers. So what happens when your APIs are unavailable? Make sure there's a recovery plan in place as well. I also have some best practices for data senders. I'm not going to read through these because they are very similar. But again, if you're a data sender and you wanted to screenshot to have a handy reference guide, now is a good time. And then more generally, I do want to talk about best practices for technology professionals. If you're not a data sender or a data receiver yourself, but you work with integration, this is a key list of things that can really assist you. Familiarizing yourself with different types of API documentation. Learn to understand request and response information. If you can determine the type of an API you can send or receive, you can determine the type of data an API can send or receive accurately, you can figure out how to best integrate with it and what type of integration is possible. Stay up to date with changes and stay curious. Ask questions, learn, share, and repeat. If you take away one thing from my session today, make it this one. Once you know the type of data a given API can send or receive, the possibilities of what that platform can do becomes so much easier to navigate. Focus on learning what types of APIs a platform supports and how the data they send or receive can be leveraged by different technologies. Think about data. An API that can fetch a customer's name, telephone number, and shipping address can be used in a variety of different ways. A direct mail company can leverage that data to send targeted marketing materials. A shipping company can use it to generate a mailing label. A digital marketing platform can use demographic information to gain insights, and a phone number for SMS messaging, provided the customer is opted in. And those are just a few ways that types of data can be leveraged as a point of integration. Once I have an idea of the data that I can gather, the possibilities of what I can do with it become clear. Thank you. Again, I am Amber Fallon, Ometria's Technical Sales Engineer. I hope that you have found my presentation today valuable. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out with any questions. I'm always happy to connect and meet new people. Next up, our presenters are Stuart Barker and Ben Cook of Comestri.
Thank you very much, Amber. Thanks for the introduction there. I loved the presentation. Thank you. I'm going to take a note of when you do things right, nobody knows you've done anything at all. I'm going to get that printed on a t-shirt. I'm going to wear it around my house a lot. I think that would ease some tension.
I love that.
That's grand. Look, thanks for having us here today. We're really pleased to be here both with Ometria and with Findologic. And the reason that we're excited as Comestri is we want to tell our story, and we want to tell our story in the context of these other great technology organizations. And today is obviously all about technology, and we're going to look at things through a technology lens. And my colleague Ben, who's been in the business for a long time, he's been building our pathways to market and really understanding the requirements and needs that our customers have from a technology perspective. He's here to talk about that in more detail. But I wanted just to kick off today with a bit of the why and who Comestri is and why we're attending today and why we think we can add value to these two amazing organizations. When we look at Ometria, I think they've got a fantastic story around customer data, right? And bringing together really valuable customer data, understanding behavioral patterns and helping organizations to make sense of that. When we look at Findologic, again, they are driving conversations around product discovery. The common piece here is that you can have all the customer data in the world. If you don't have the product data to go with it, you can't personalize. You can't start to bring together these amazing orchestrated experiences where product is really well matched to our consumer. And if we flip to the other side and we look at Findologic, again, if a product isn't properly described, it can't be properly discovered. So there's the intersection of kind of these three companies around product. And Comestri, this is what we do. So we're a technology provider. We're headquartered in Australia. We're in high growth mode in Europe and high growth mode in APAC. We solve a really difficult problem, which is the product journey. As it enters into your organization, as it's pushed to your customers and where they can buy it, when they've made their purchasing decisions, how do we ship that product to them? This is the journey that we're looking after within our platform. And I'm very pleased here to have, today to have Ben here with us, who can talk a little bit about how our technology and our API-led approach to market helps us enable some really good outcomes here. So I'm based in Europe. I'm here to help and serve anyone on this call. If you have any inquiries or questions, please do contact me. But right now I'm going to hand over to Ben, and he's going to take us through the way we see the API ecosystem and how Comestri sort of facilitates really good outcomes around product and shipping. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Amber, before that, and thanks for having me along today to describe a little bit about our journey and where APIs fit into our landscape, and also I think from a practical reality perspective, where we start to use data through the conversation of APIs for better experiences in the by and large in the retail world. So that's largely what I'm going to focus my presentation on today. So as we kind of get into that, as Amber quite rightly pointed out, she did a great job of talking about the use of APIs and what an API is. We come at this from a product perspective, as Stuart mentioned, and when we look at the world of e-com, and when we look at the world of commerce, and we look at the world of retail, we're starting to see things like product data, inventory data, catalog data, pricing, promotions, customer data, all being consumed by different end tools. And that conversation and validation of that data is typically an on-the-fly kind of aspect. It's based on a consumption model, almost, give me a little bit of something, and then when I want all of it, I'll go and consume that via an API call. And so then we're starting to see that being pushed into many different applications and environments, whether that be online, in the tech space, whether it be in store, whether it be through app, and the likes. So there's some of the things that I'll chat to as part of this presentation. And hopefully you can get some kind of practical realities of what we talk about. In more recent times, there's been a lot of discussion in retail about what is headless, what is composable commerce, how do I share this data between applications, how do I go and fetch data when it's needed and when it's required, rather than plug all of this data into these kind of monolithic systems. And so in our world, what was originally headless, which was kind of I've got this monolithic system, and off the back of this monolithic system, I would put a stencil on top, create an environment. That environment, that stencil kind of got cut off. Everyone started producing PWAs, but they were still calling data from a monolithic environment. And that really became the world of headless. When you start to then move into a composable commerce world, it's actually looking at what are the best of breed solutions that can supply me information as I require it from an application that is sense of purpose or has a sense of purpose for what it does. And for that, then I'm then looking at those applications and then building those applications into my website, my mobile app, my digital marketplace. We're seeing the consumption of that data then being personalized into email marketing tools, consumer loyalty tools, where they want elements of that data. They may not want the full stack, they may want the full data load, but they want elements of that to kind of better themselves for, and again, there's a lot of talk around things like AI and the like, but essentially when you start looking at personalization and personalization tools, again, whether you're in the Findologic space or when you're in the customer space, you're kind of using certain aspects of information to merchandise better, offer a better outcome to essentially your consumer. And that's definitely where we're seeing the retail space going. Interestingly, we do a lot of work with Gartner. They do have a good tendency to be able to kind of graphically represent this. And so when we're sort of moving through this experience of what APIs actually provide, we have moved away from this, what's my all-in-one system? My all-in-one system didn't have to care about APIs because it didn't really have communication methods. And then we started to think about this experience-led system. So we start going into headless, and that headless environment said, well, actually, this is really useful when I've got a storefront, but actually, if I now need a mobile application, how am I going to go and connect to that data that hasn't previously been provided to me? And then when we start going into this modular API first environment, it's then starting to look at these kind of best of breed solutions with API layers sitting on top of them that then get consumed as required. And with the advancement, I think, of technology, communication methods, speed, the internet, as we move towards a kind of ecom, what we term an ecom 3.0 environment, it's then really looking at the outcomes and the experiences that I then want to provide. Nobody does this stuff just for fun. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and just says, oh, I'm going to go and build some APIs today into my API layer. But really, they're trying to create an outcome. And that outcome is largely focused at the moment around consumer experience, customer experience, user experience, personalization, and being able to provide a better experience for the purpose of the outcome. And that's really where we're starting to see ecom 3.0 go. Again, we've kind of gone from the, the 1.0, the 2, where we've created there's global organizations now in that ecom space that have, very robust systems. And the API first approach isn't necessarily for everyone. Again, you do need to understand the technology, you need to understand how it comes together, you need to understand where I'm going to go and grab different bits from different organizations, different systems. But when you start getting to ecom 3.0, this connected world that we now live in allows me to go and do that. And it's really interesting in what I think was really an articulation of a vision that sort of happened probably 25, 30 years ago. So, why would we do this? We want that personalized experience. Speed is of the essence nowadays. If I don't have to kind of plug information into a single system and then read from that system, then I can create a much faster, much more highly scalable outcome by being able to communicate with different systems at a point in time. This concept of just give me the information that I require when I require it stops us having to kind of move data through all of these different systems. This concept of vendor flexibility, people are creating API layers and communication layers, which allow me to say, if something comes along that's better than what I've got right now, I am covered. It's less risk for an organization. Rather than choosing a single system that's now going to be with me for the next 7 to 10 years, I can actually choose a system that's right for me right now, depending on my growth and scale. And if it's not right for me in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, I can actually move it out of my stack and choose something else. The concept of unique journeys, again, starts to look at, right, well, I used to consume all this information online when you came to my website. But then when I sent you an email, I actually paid no attention to that kind of information. Whereas now we're starting to say, well, depending on where my journey starts and my customer journey starts, it could be through email, online, into Google, through digital, through marketplaces, and eventually land online. But then I also need the same types of information in store when we think about retail, because that journey needs to be consistent. And therefore I want the same information consumed throughout that journey. So then when we start to kind of visualize this, again, this is admittedly a very kind of retail orientated aspect of what we're sort of looking at. But we think about content, we think about blog posts, we think about video, we think about the marketing material that's out there saying, I'm trying to add value to you by describing the products and the product sets that I'm offering. And that can be down to where material is farmed, how it's consumed, the sustainability aspects of what we're looking at nowadays, how I look after this thing. If I send out, and if I'm a manufacturer of car vehicles and I need to send out maintenance videos, on an ongoing basis, how am I going to do that based on the information that gets consumed? So content is all important, as is promotions, loyalty. Again, we think about CDPs, we think about customer data, how they blend together with loyalty so that I can then start to look at, well, I've got customer data, I've got content, I've got loyalty, but then I still really need to sell my products, and that product needs to be at the right price and come at the right time. And so these kind of layers, and this information stack sort of sits there and then says, right, I then need to feed this into a mobile device. I need to feed it into my online e-commerce website. I need to feed it into my social commerce outputs. And then I may go beyond that. And so I think, for us as an organization that tends to have an API first approach, we're then starting to get inquiries going, I really want that product feed. You need to give it to me so that it can feed my personalization engine, so that I know that when I'm sending out an email to that consumer, it's the product that they want. I've got inventory that sits behind that, and therefore they can consume that as and when is required by them. And in the retail world, we talk a lot about trust. but really it's also about making sure that the right product is in front of them at the right time when they want to buy it. And so, you know, again, I can kind of bang on about this sort of stuff for hours, but, you know, we then start to look at, well, where does Comestri play in that? We have this concept of a materialized cached environment. It's kind of the precursor. It's like pre-logic that then says, you know, if I'm a department store, I need to curate a product experience that's very different if I'm offering white goods to furniture, to homewares, to clothing. And so the curation of that experience is going to be different. It's got different product spec sheets. The manner in which you're buying it, the way in which you're buying it is very different. And so when I think about that kind of department store kind of mindset, the ability to kind of create and pre-compose data sets that then can be called on by this presentation orchestration layer, I think is all important. And also then for us, we then start to think about inventory. You know, we have very detailed conversations around inventory. No retailer out there likes oversells. It's like the bane of their existence, having to phone a customer and say, I need to give you a refund because you bought something that we can't deliver the promise on. And so the concept of inventory comes down to how do we get close to real-time inventory calls across my entire stack so that I can with 100% guarantee that what you're trying to buy online is also readily available in store, is also readily available through my mobile application. And that kind of concept of our delivery API then starts to look at not only have we got it, but how do you want it, right? If you then start adding things to cart, change the weight of that cart, then the delivery aspects of that needs to change to the customer. So that customer promise needs to change. And I'm now communicating my customer promise electronically, not verbally. And so as a result, you know, these API calls are constantly querying data and databases to say, the user now wants this, what is our response to that? And I guess the sort of satisfaction of the user then comes down to the quality of that information. And when that information is stored within a best of breed solution, you can assure that the quality of that information is as good as it's going to get. And I think for us, you know, definitely looking at this API approach has allowed us to then say, you can go and have a better quality of conversation by picking up data from us, rather than us having to send it to a third party and then you're getting it from them. And I think, you know, if I go back to what some of the things that Amber was talking about, you know, it comes down to that communication method, you know, how quick that communication method is, how the nature of that communication method. And if you are then communicating based on a lot of data, you know, do you enforce rate limits on those sorts of things too? And again, yeah, that all then is tailored based on the architecture set that you're trying to build. I often kind of throw up, you know, two clients of ours that are here in Australia. One is an organisation called Adore Beauty. They've recently listed. They are without doubt probably the golden child of the e-com space and the pure play space over here in Australia. They've built an exceptional headless and composable architecture that really provides incredible content interjected with product data. You can buy product from just about anything that they have on site, whether you're in a blog post, whether you're in a category page. And so, you know, that product data, the product experience that they offer is exceptional. And then another customer of ours, which is Pillow Talk, have a really interesting set of logic that looks at groups of products and whether those groups of products, because they're in that homeware space, is available within store through a click and collect or a ship from store model, and therefore what that delivery promise is. So, you know, kind of interesting practical outcomes of where APIs are at the forefront of, you know, web experiences, in-store experiences, and that kind of deliverability that you have in terms of your customer promise and the customer experience. So, by and large, I think that's it for me. I am now going to hand over, I think, to you, George, on Findologic. So, on behalf of Comestri, hope you like the story. Feel free to contact Stuart, and if you want to know more about what we're doing in the kind of API first layer of what we're experiencing, then happy to take questions after.
George, I think you're muted.
All right. No. Did I stop the screen share? Sorry, you can hear me now, but I can't see the screen anymore. Is the screen share still on?
Yeah, just let me start the screen sharing again.
So, work well for everyone so far?
Sorry for these technical issues, but I think give me a second. I think it should work now again.
All right, I can see this. Let me see if I. Okay. Yeah. All right. We're back. Thanks. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah. So again, thanks everyone for the input so far. That was a really great overview of API usage architectures, and I'd like to dive a bit more into the technical aspects of how to API. My name is Georg Sost. I'm a principal engineer at Findologic, and this is us at Findologic. We offer on-site search and navigation solutions. We're especially in the German-speaking market in Europe, but also have offices in Salzburg, Munich, and London, are expanding rapidly there. So when I start to integrate an API, there's typically 4 phases that I'm following. It starts off with the discovery phase, so understanding the API strategy of the solution provider I'm using there, trying to identify the actual API I want to use, that I want to integrate. Then diving into the specific API some more, exploring this, see what capabilities it has, which data it can send and receive. Then once I have get a better understanding of the API, connecting to this API in a secure fashion, and then finally actually starting to use the API, integrating it into my website or application. So let's take a closer look at these different phases. And first one, discovery, trying to understand, trying to identify the API, trying to understand the API strategy. Typically, the 2 resources that we'll use in this part of the process are our developer hub, so an entry point that your provider offers, documentation hub that points you to more specific documentation, but will help you to get a first understanding of their API strategy. A lot of providers are also offering API libraries, so really just a list of all the APIs that they offer, so you can identify the right API you want to use here. Some examples on this is our developer hub at Findologic, so you can see it has the API documentation, there's documentation, data exchange formats, FAQs, and so on. So everything that will point you in the right direction to integrate our APIs. Amber mentioned this before, so Ometria, of course, has also developer hub. Here's another example from Salesforce. And finally, another example, this is the Google API Explorer, so their API library, which lists all of the Google APIs. There's a lot of them, and it's very neat. You can search these APIs and drill down on them. For example, I was looking for analytics APIs, and you can easily identify all the analytics APIs that Google offers and take a closer look at the APIs and understand them better. So these are some resources that will help you in the discovery phase, understanding what the APIs do, identifying the actual API that you want to use for your use case, integrate into your website. And once you've identified this API, I will move on to the exploration phase. So getting a better understanding of the specific API, its capabilities, the data it's working with, and so on. Before we take a closer look at this, I want to take a step back and quickly look at different API styles that you will encounter when looking at APIs. So typically today you will find REST APIs and GraphQL APIs. REST is, I would say, the industry standard. It's been around since the year 2000, so 20 years in IT terms. That's very old. This is basically the default APIs. You will encounter most APIs from most providers in the REST style. The alternative is GraphQL. It's also been around for 10 years now. It's still sort of the contender, I would say. It's up and coming. But the default, the industry standard, I would say, is REST. The main difference in their styles is that REST is based on single resources. So for example, imagine you're offering a block as an API. And in this block, you have different resources, for example, companies, authors, posts, and so on. And with REST, it's very easy to fetch information on a company, on an author, on a post, fetch the content of a post, and so on. But it's a bit more hard if you want to exploit these relationships, for example, fetching all the posts from one company. That's a bit more complicated with REST. So it works very well with single resources, but if you have resource graphs, that's a bit more complicated. This is where GraphQL shines. You can tell already from the name that it works very well with graphs. It exploits these relationships. So you have people or authors in a company, and these authors have posts. So there's some relationship between these different resources, and GraphQL is very good at exploiting these resources. So you can easily fetch all posts from all people in a company with GraphQL very easily, but there's a certain overhead involved if you're working with really simple resources. We'll take a look at an example on the next slide. REST is basically just a simple layer on top of HTTP. It uses standard HTTP methods, so it's really very simple to use. You can even use it from your browser without any extra tools. GraphQL, on the other hand, has a special query languages. You need some tooling to use it. It's a bit harder to integrate if you're an API provider. It's a bit harder to integrate if you're an API consumer, as it has this query language that you need to use, but still works over HTTP. So I would say REST is really great if you have simple resources, you don't have very strongly connected resources or complex resource graphs, data models, then REST is much easier, just less overhead. GraphQL, if you have complicated APIs, very connected data models, then GraphQL might be the way to go, but expect some overhead, expect some boilerplate that you need to apply to make this work. A quick, sorry. Sorry, there's the slide missing. These are different API styles. I will focus a bit more on REST in the rest of the presentation. So typically, if you look at REST APIs, you and explore these in more detail, you will typically find open API specifications. So open API specifications are a way of documenting APIs. I think Emma mentioned this before. And they will list all the different resources that are available within the APIs, the different things you can do with this API. This is an example from us, from Findologic. So you can see there's a search resource, there's a navigation resource, suggestions, and so on. So this will list all the different resources and methods within this API. And these API specs, as Emma mentioned before, they're the roadmap and the dictionary. So they are human readable. They will help you get you along the API and how to use it, but they're also machine readable, which is a fact that we will exploit a bit later. And of course, you can drill down this documentation. Here we're taking a closer look at the search resource. So if you want to generate search results, product search results using our API, this is what the API method looks like. You can see which parameters you can send with the API, their data types, a short description of the parameters, some example values. You will also find a description of the response, so what the search results will look like, how you have to process them. And another very neat feature of this open API specifications is that they usually have an interactive try it out feature. So if you just open this API specification in your browser, there's a try it out button, and you can start trying out this API, getting a grip on it before even implementing any code, just straight from your browser. Here you can see I'm sending a search request, and in the response button, you can see the response from the API, what a typical search response looks like. So this is very useful for the exploration phase, trying to get a better understanding of the API even before writing any code. And yeah, trying out how it actually works. This is what it looks like for Ometria. Of course, they also have an API documentation. It's a bit prettier than ours, so good job on this one. And yeah, once you've explored the API some more, have a better understanding of its capabilities, of the data it's working with, then the next phase is connecting to the API in a secure fashion. And what this means is most APIs are not public, so your website will need to supply some credentials to this API in order to unlock it, to ensure that you can only access the resources that you're actually allowed to access. and you need to transmit this key, this token, to the API provider somehow. There's a few typical methods that you will encounter when authenticating against an API. So the simplest one is an API key that is mostly used for public data. For example, if you want to embed a Google Maps widget on your website, then you need to get an API key from Google and connect this API key to this Google Maps widget. And this helps Google identify the website where the Google Maps widget is embedded. And for example, they can of course use this to charge you depending how many times or how much this Google Maps widget is used. The API key can be used in both client to server communication and server to server communication. So this is for public data mostly. If you want to access company data, for example, fetching some data from your CRM provider, then you will probably use a service account. This is for company data. It identifies a website, a machine account, and it's almost exclusively used for server-to-server communication and to access company data that is not public. And finally, there's OAuth 2 mechanism. I think Ben mentioned this before as well. OAuth 2 is used if you want to access user data. One very prominent example is the login with Google, login with Facebook buttons you can find in websites. OAuth 2 identifies an application and a user, and it allows you to access the user's private data, for example, with the login with Google button. If the user consents to this usage, then you will be able to access their name, email address, profile picture, postal address, and so on. So if you want to access user data on your website and your application, then OAuth is the way to go. So all these kind of different authentication styles, they usually have some kind of secret, an API key, a service account key, and so on. And the secret, well, it's secret, so you have to make sure it's not exposed to the public. And I quickly want to share some best practices around security, how to make sure this doesn't, this token, the secret is not exposed. The most important aspect is never add credentials, never add these secrets to your source code, because source code can easily be accessed by third parties. Could just be a software outsourcing company that you're working with. Could be that someone is setting the wrong access rights on your source code repositories, and then your secret is exposed to the world. So never add credentials to source code. Instead, inject them at runtime. Use something like a secret manager that most of the cloud platforms offer in order to keep the secret there and inject it only when it's needed into the application. So this is the absolute most important step. Then some more best practices, restrict the usage. So most APIs allow you to set fine-grained controls or fine-grained scopes on the access rights of the secret. For example, on your website, maybe you only want to read or list the CRM customers, but not write or modify them. In this case, you can create a secret that will only be able to read customers, but not write them. And of course, this will limit damage when the token is accidentally exposed. Then they cannot modify, they cannot mess up your CRM data. They can read it, which is bad enough, but at least they cannot ruin your data and modify it some more. Also always good is some housekeeping. So if there's some credentials that you don't need to use anymore, revoke them. This will prevent you from forgetting tokens that might be exposed, and then also regenerating. That's the peak of security best practices. Regenerating your tokens regularly, quarterly, yearly. So in case the token was secretly stolen, then after a while they won't be able to use it anymore. Yeah, so this is the connection phase. So you need to pick the right authentication style, make sure you keep your secrets safe and use them in a correct way and not expose them to the world. Once you have connected to this API, then you can actually start using this API. Again, there's a couple of different options. So you need some sort of code usually to integrate this API, some sort of code to access this API, and there's a couple of options. The first one, the best one, if you can use it, is an SDK, a software development kit. So a library with the right code to access the API. Ideally, this is supplied by your API provider. So by Findologic, by Comestri, by Ometria. Oftentimes you will also find them as a third-party project or an open source project bundled to give you all the code you need to access the API. The benefits of this is that it's sort of automatically updated. So if there's changes to the API and new capabilities, then the API provider will take care of updating their SDK. Downside is it might not support your programming languages. So maybe you have a website that's built on PHP, but there's only a JavaScript SDK available, then you're out of luck there. Another option is generating code. As I mentioned before, open API specs are not only human, but also machine readable. So you can actually generate the API access code from this open API spec. Again, the downside is that it's sort of automatically updated because you can just regenerate the code in case the API spec changes. And in my experiences, this works pretty well for simple APIs, but if you have more complex APIs, then the generated code might not be ideally suited or might not work very well. Finally, of course, you can always write your custom code to access the API. This is, of course, a completely manual effort, but it will be perfectly tailored to your specific needs, your architecture, your framework. But yeah, you have to take care of updating your code in case the API changes. Again, some examples. So this is our SDK, just a short example code of what how to use our API, which provides a nice abstraction layer on top of search, navigation, suggest, and so on. And this is the official Open API code generator. So you can see it lists a lot of languages. This is just the beginning of the list. So if you want to generate code from the OpenA, you almost certainly will be able to generate it in the specific language you need. So this wraps it up for me, a quick summary. So the 4 different phases, we'll start off with the discovery, understanding the API strategy, identifying the right API to use, then exploring this API, understanding its capabilities, connecting to it in a secure way, and then finally using it, downloading, generating, or writing the code that is required to access the API. And then you're good to go and can integrate it and improve your customer experience. Thanks, that's it for me.
Yeah, first of all, big thank you to all speakers and their valuable input. As mentioned in the beginning, we now have a few more minutes to answer any questions. So let's have a look into the chat. There are no questions right now, and there are no questions in the Q&A session. So let's wait for another minute and see if there are more questions to our speakers. But it looks fine. Yeah, okay. If there are no more questions, there is only one thing to say: stay safe and have a great rest of the week. Thank you to all speakers and your input, and see you soon.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.